Hello, my friends. Welcome to today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. I am super happy to be here with you in this new year, new month. Welcome. If it's your very first time listening, welcome back. If you're here all the time, I promise I will stop talking about this very soon because these programs are right up and coming here. But this is your reminder that a lot of program cutoffs are happening very soon, January 15th. So if you are interested in working with me in 2024, yes, there will be more opportunities later on throughout the year, but there's a couple that first and foremost, the Fat Loss Challenge is an 8-week group program. I only run 3 times a year. So if you do miss the boat on it, you've got to wait till spring. So you can go back and listen to all the details in a December episode. I outline what that looks like, all our programs. You can also go to the website healthycatholicmoms.com, but it kicks off January 15th. So just want to give you a reminder on that deadline. Now, the Chasing Greatness group is a monthly workout group that is for those who have already done the 8-week challenge, who want to hang around and continue to work out together, train together, just be motivated by each other. It's a community of over 60 ladies right now. I'm sure much more. We're going to grow even more in 2024. We do live Zoom workouts together. You get pre-recorded videos every single month. You get meal plans, all that great stuff. And that you can hop in any month of the year. So even if you're thinking like, well, both sound great, I would love you to do the 8-week first because it really sets the foundation. And then yes, you can absolutely hop into Chasing Greatness group later on in the year. That's what most ladies do. But if you have done an 8-week challenge with me already and just want to hop into the Chasing Greatness group, I have an early bird price that goes away January 15th. So January 15th, the cutoff for both, for sure. I'm trying to close the challenge sooner than that. It might be closed at the time of you hearing this. I'm not sure. You can check on the website because I am pre-recording this a little bit ahead of time. All right, now down to business. Today, we are talking about how to raise the bar for yourself in 2024. Now, first and foremost, I want you to know I'm always talking to myself. Okay. I have to tell myself these things all the time. And these are real conversations I have with myself, like a crazy person, with my friends, also crazy people. No, I'm just kidding. That we get to bounce ideas off each other that I'm super thankful for. And then my husband as well, who, God bless him, has to listen to like these. I feel like I have a revelation each time. He's like, you talk about this stuff every couple weeks, like, you know that, like it is on a rotation, but it feels like, oh no, I just had this like grand, idea, this epiphany. And it's so easy. This is why I think like, oh, every time I feel like it's a revelation. It's so easy right now in our culture to get super sucked in to just the placating ourselves, that we need to cater to our every emotion, that we are just doing a good job because we woke up for the day. Like, seriously, if you're already rolling your eyes and laughing at me, think about the mom reels you see or the memes or the whatever. I mean, we are a very far cry from like going on the Oregon Trail. Okay. Like, I like to think of really drastic things. I'm like, women like plop their babies out on the trail and then stuck them in a wrap and had to keep going or you were going to die. Like you could not be left behind. Yes, those are human. That is where my mind goes. But you know, it's just very easy to look around and get the like pat yourself on the back because you're doing enough. You're probably not even recognized as it is. Don't like very, very hand-holdy, soft vibe is what's going on, in my opinion, in motherhood culture and just in culture in general. So I kind of want to push back on that a little bit. And I have some points that I really will follow. So it's not just a rant the entire time, but a little bit more structured. My first thought here is that comparison, in my opinion, can be motivating and I think is actually kind of a tool. Now, I do not mean comparison like, wow, she's so, thin and toned or like athletic looking. Like, I wish I looked like her. I am not talking about a jealousy or envy kind of situation. I'm talking about when you look at someone who maybe has even more pressing circumstances than you do, and you're like, well, she's doing it somehow. Like, I can do it too. That's what I like to think in a lot of situations where I feel overwhelmed or I feel that's been a big thing for me. You guys know, if you've been here for a while, that we are homeschooling currently. And I have a first graders who I like officially have to homeschool, and then I've got a preschooler, toddler, etc., and a baby at time of recording this. Well, when the time of you listening to this, I'm still pregnant at time of recording this. So right now I am homeschooling like 2.5 kind of. But when I think, holy cow, how can I possibly teach this 6-year-old math when I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old like wrestling in the corner? Like, this is actually impossible. I think, no, someone else is doing it, and someone's doing it with like twin 2-year-olds, and they're pregnant and whatever. And the list goes on, where like you can feel bad for yourself that you have to solo parent, say 2 days a week, because your husband works like morning to night. And then there are people who have lost their husbands who are literally single and solo parenting all the time, 24/7. So those are things I think about in a lot of different categories. So I think it's helpful with health and fitness and stuff too, is like we can very easily give ourselves the out, give ourselves the excuses of, well, I don't have the time. Well, I don't have the resources. Well, if I had more family support, I don't have any family in town. Some people have their moms help and watch the kids, like lots of different things we can kind of just pacify ourselves with. And at the end of the day, even doing that does not make us any better, doesn't make us feel better, doesn't help us reach our goals more, be happier, healthier, anything. If I thought that, well, because I don't have a mother's helper, I don't have anyone who routinely watches my kids, etc. I'm running a business, homeschooling, blah, blah, blah. If I were to compare myself to somebody and think like, well, she has a mother's helper every Tuesday, and on Thursdays, her husband works from home, so she gets another work day. Like, well, I could be successful in XYZ if I just had that. Like, no, own your circumstances and figure out what you're doing. Somebody else is doing it with less resources than you are. That's just true. So I think comparison can be really helpful in that way. Like, somebody out there has it harder and they're doing it. Or just being inspired by amazing things people have done, no matter what the resources and things like that. Like, my kids and I were doing science the other day, and it's a book that has QR links to scan, and you watch whatever video. There was a 14-year-old boy who climbed like all the highest peaks in the world. He had seen a video. I'm going to butcher this retelling, but I think, okay, loosely think he had seen a video about somebody climbing Everest or read a book on it or something, and decided he wanted to do that. So this kid ends up climbing all these peaks, Everest, Kilimanjaro, all these places. By the time he's 14, like his first summit, I forget which one it was at 10 years old. And I'm watching that also as a parent, thinking like, that is terrifying. And I do not want my 10-year-old to try and climb Mount Everest. Like, the dad did it with him. And I was like, I showed my husband later. I was like, could you imagine being the parent that's like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I want to climb a mountain with you and not, absolutely panic the entire time. But I'm a far cry from that. But I'm saying, like, for my kids watching that, they're like, oh my goodness, like they saw what was possible for a 14-year-old to do. Again, I don't really want them to do that, but I hope you get my point there. Like, just seeing what other people do sometimes opens your eyes to so many more possibilities. Like, we just sometimes pigeonhole ourselves into, well, I can't do that. And then all the reasons why. And that's kind of, I'm going to actually bounce around. He said I wouldn't, but you don't know my bullet points, so it's okay. This was like 3 bullet points down, but I think it applies. Very closely connected to this, I think, is the fact that it's easy to settle into identities. Ed Mylett talks about this a lot in his The Power of One More book and on his podcast and whatnot, that and I'm sure other people do too, I've just heard him as a resource on this, where it's easy to change, not easy. It's more simple though, to change our behaviors, change our habits and whatnot. Like, you can just make yourself start doing something when if you're like, I'm just going to take a greens powder every day because I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I'll just take a greens powder. That's something you could just start doing. It's harder to then adopt the whole mindset of like, I am a healthy person. I am a fit person, whatever. So it's true. It's a lot of people, I think, get stuck in this. And a lot of ladies I've worked with are like, well, I'm just like not an active person, or we put ourselves in these labels. So kind of goes with what I was talking about comparison. If you're looking at somebody else and you're thinking, well, I'm just not XYZ, you can be, okay. Anyone can change at any time. if it's something that you want to do, right? So the way we talk to ourselves, I've heard this with like on parenting podcasts. I don't totally agree with this, but I'm gonna like modify it for for my own purposes right now. I've heard the like training up your children in the way that you want them to go, in the way they should go, as the Bible says, though, of like using the phrase "you're not a whatever." Like say your last name, say your kid like lies, and you're like, Pearsons aren't liars, you know, or like if your kids are really picky eaters, like, well, Pearson's just like mushrooms or something, like saying that kind of stuff. I really have heard these almost exact examples. And I'm like, yes, but yes. And I don't know, like there's some things I think that doesn't apply to, but there's some things I think it totally does. So it's the talking to yourself and not listening to yourself, right? Don't play off your own emotions. Tell yourself what's going on. And I do some of those phrases, I'm sure, with my kids of like, nope, just like we're not quitters kind of a thing. Like, nope, Pearsons don't quit. Like that is totally what I would use. So you can, take a break, you can whatever, you can figure it out, but Pearsons don't quit or whatever. So talk to yourself like that. That is something, there's another bullet point, I'm hopping around. If you give yourself an out, you will take it. Okay. So this whole time we're talking about raising the bar, right? So if it's like I'm shooting for this, but I'm happy with this. I want this, but this. If you give yourself a plan B, you're going to take it. If you signed yourself up for a full marathon and then had the mentality going into it day of like, well, if I'm really tired at 13.1, I'll just stop at the half, that's also fine. You're going to have that in the back of your mind and you're going to take it. Also, true story, that occurred to me when I didn't go into, it was not this past summer because I was pregnant. The summer before, I ran a 50-mile race. Talked about it a lot on here because I learned a lot from the training. Also, if you're newer here and you haven't heard me talk about it, I just want to let you know too, if you're a person listening to this thinking, well, she's a trainer and she's worked out forever and and it must be easy for her. I'm just like you, and I have to build from the ground up every single baby, every single gain the 30 pounds, lose the 30 pounds, whatever. And I had my baby in July. I decided to start training for it in January once I took those months to rebuild my core and start from square one. I started in January with 1 mile, and I worked my way from January to August up to the 50 miles. But going into it, I had, like my mentality of like, I just have to finish it. I don't care if it's slow. I have to finish it, blah, blah, blah. Day of, it was extremely hot, like heat advisory hot, super humid. You start at 10 a.m. So like right in the heat and direct sunlight, no shade. Like I am not exaggerating this to be the uphill both ways. This is notoriously like the dead of summer, direct sunlight kind of race. Now around me, people were dropping like flies and people were making excuses like flies. And it was crazy to me because again, I am a mom of 3 who really doesn't get out much. Let's be honest. I'm recording podcasts for you in my basement. This is like my social time and you can't even talk back to me. So I was pumped to just be out of the house all day and was like, wow, for like 10 hours, I can just listen to music, listen to podcasts. Like, this is awesome. So I'm like amped and having a good time, even though I'm dying. And I was shocked by just like I don't know any other expression, but just poor attitudes of people around me that were like, oh, it's so hot. Oh, they don't have the right snacks. Oh, I know this. Oh, and a lot of people were stopping. Like a lot of people just disqualified from the race, just did not finish. And it occurred to me at some point during the run of like, because there was an option when you signed up, you could either be doing 25 miles or 50. And it crossed my mind for a second to be like, I could just stop at 25. Like, that's pretty good too. And no, I had to dismiss it very quickly to be like, that's not what you signed up for. Like, no, you're doing 50. Like, don't give yourself the out because you will take it is the tip 1 in there. And tip 2 of talk to yourself, don't listen to yourself, and tell yourself what you are. I'm a person that works out every day. Then you work out every day. And I use that loosely because if you know me, you know my training style, I don't want you to actually work out every day. I do believe in moving daily, but that looks like rest days being stretching or walking or whatever. I just think it is easier to have, I think your body works better if you move in some way every day, but I don't mean a vigorous workout every day. Anyway, you get the idea. So talk to yourself, don't listen to yourself. Last two thoughts here. Number one is, I know these have not actually been any number, but number one of my last two thoughts is that there are differing opinions out there on about setting your goals. So I talked about this a little bit in, I think it was the very end of December episode, might have been I think the last episode of December, we talked about goal setting. And I mentioned how in SMART goals, one of the, it's an acronym that one of them is for realistic and attainable, I think. Attainable and realistic. I think both of them are in there. And there's a lot of people who don't agree with that, who think like, no, if you're setting attainable goals, then they're easy to reach. Like you need to push it beyond that. You need to set, I've heard people explain it as BHAG goals, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals that like freak you out, that you're like, I'm probably not going to be able to do that. And for me, going back to that race, 50 miles sitting there, I was pregnant when I decided to do this. So I'm sitting there super pregnant. And the reason I thought of it, which gets into my next tip, is that I was reading an inspiring book. I was reading Ross Edgley's The World's Fittest Book, where he talks about doing all these amazing feats just to do them pretty much. And I was reading it thinking like, holy cow, like, yeah, like I should just run 50 miles. Like, why not? And to me, I had not run in years, guys. Like this is again, not a thing like, oh, well, I was doing half marathons right before I was pregnant. No, I had not run in years. My last marathon was before kids. And this was my third kid. Like, okay. So to tell you, this was not a like, oh yeah, I'll just do this. This was a big, hairy, audacious goal. So I used to be a SMART goal setter of the attainable, realistic. And now I'm kind of changing my thinking to like, no, you got to shoot for it. Like you got to raise the bar. And what? Because we're so afraid of failure. And this is me too. And I struggle with pride. It was very hard for me to even talk about on the podcast. I had started training already, but I was like, I don't really want to say it because my excuse was, well, what if I get pregnant and then I can't do the race? Like, so I don't want to say it. No, really, I was worried that I'd start training and wimp out. And I'd already told all of you. That was truly my fear. So I think a lot of us, it's a pride thing. Maybe we don't like feeling like we failed. So we want to set a safer goal. I want to challenge you to up level whatever your goals are, even just your mentality. Like you don't have to be training for 50-mile race. You don't have to be training for powerlifting competition. You don't have to be training for anything like maximum edge of whatever kind of fitness. Okay. It's just having that mentality of expecting more of yourself than you currently are, or than society would expect you to, or than your friends do, and I think this is so big because I think a lot of times we are comparing ourselves to people who are not doing much. And then we feel better about ourselves. Like, well, I mean, maybe you don't do this, but thinking about like your sphere of influence right around you, maybe neighbors or friends or whatever, that it's like, well, I'm doing this. Like, well, they don't even work out at all and I'm working out or whatever. But you need to like change your role models is a great way to up level yourself because, if you are, I think you get the point. I'm not going to belabor that. The last, I just caught myself straight off that tangent. The last tip here, which is what I alluded to with me reading Ross's book, is to study, surround yourself with, and learn from the greats because success leaves clues. It's really true. It's not a big secret. There are so many books. I've talked about this with when ladies ask me like, how do you get up in the morning? How do you be as productive as you can? How do you do time management? I have read a ton of books like that. I've read books like What Most Successful People Do in the Morning. I Know How She Does It. The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg, all these books that like you can actually, this is not some big code you have to crack. You can study people who have achieved a lot of things or who get a lot of things done or whatever. It doesn't have to be a lot of things, but I'm saying great things, right? Because it's not how much, it's how, right? That's who we should be looking up to. So don't compare yourself to like the other mom at school who's like in her sweatpants complaining about how she has to get dinner on the stove and her house is a mess and blah, blah, blah. I get it. We all I think there is totally a time and place for commiserating with people And obviously we all have bad days, like those kinds of things. Like, no, everything should be picture perfect. No one's perfect, all that stuff. If you swung by my house, I was joking about this with my husband. I will go on this tangent because I don't want you to think that I think I'm perfect all the time. The other day, there is this adorable neighbor I have who is like 85 and her husband is like 89. They're this adorable little Italian couple. And she is always just done up, like, has the matching top with the bottom with the house shoes if you go to see her at her house, or her outside shoes if she's at your house, with the earrings, with the makeup, like always at any time. I'm like, I think I could ring her doorbell at 2 a.m. and she'd answer the door like that. I really think she'd probably have a really cute little nightie with a little like house coat. Like that is what she'd have. So it's funny because I have personally been on this crusade to dress better at my home. I went on a whole tangent about this. I'm having deja vu about it. For those of you who were blessed enough to listen to the podcast episode, I have no idea what it was. I went on this rant about house shoes, which I would love you to know. I am recording this episode in my house shoes right now. So I did go ahead and buy a pair of like cheetah Keds. Basically, they're not Keds, they're Old Navy brand, but like cheetah or leopard or whatever they are, like basically Keds. You know what I mean? Like the sneakers without laces. I don't know what they're called. These are my new house shoes because I think it will help me be more productive. It's totally worked. This is like second week with them. I zip around the house. So there's a hot tip for you. Get house shoes. But anyway, I love this lady and she inspires me. Like that is an example of, I don't compare myself to some other mom who's like messy bun every day, like coffee on the sweatshirt every day, like always feeling frazzled, house is never clean, because that's not helpful to me. Like, I don't want my life to be like that. I don't want it to feel like that. I know it's not best for my mental and physical health and for probably those around me, honestly. So I want to compare myself to, seriously, my 85-year-old neighbor who always is like put together, And no, it's again not a jealousy or an envy, but it's like, okay, like she's totally different phase of life. I know that. And I know that I'm probably in real time while you're listening to this, like covered in breast milk, and that's just how it is. But like setting the bar, expecting more of ourselves, where then the days we fall short, it's no big deal. Anyway, this whole tangent was to tell you, I have been trying to dress more nicely around the house, like getting ready for each day, which we'll talk about next episode when we talk about morning routines, but getting like a real outfit with my house shoes now, like doing my hair, doing my makeup, that kind of thing. And I really was like patting myself on the back for like, wow, this has been probably a month streak. I don't know. It was really great. This is all pre-baby. So I have no idea where it's at now. And ironically, one day I slapped dinner out on paper plates. I think it was literally, I reheated pizza that was in our freezer for months. It was one of those crazy days, end of the week, reheat the pizza, slap it on paper plates. I had been wearing a good outfit all day. I had just changed into like pajama pants and whatever else. And who comes to my door but seriously said, role model neighbor. And I am in pajama pants. My family's eating off paper plates, reheated pizza, when like 9 out of 10 times we are eating a home cooked meal on China. And I was like, this is just the Lord being like, yep, humble yourself there, girl. Like you still aren't totally put together. All right. Anyway, she's also lovely and would not care. And, I'm sure didn't care, but I'm like, of course, she's at my door in her little wool coat and like leather gloves. And I like open it in my pajama pants, like, oh, hello, would you like to come in? That's how it is, right? That's how we always see people out in public, grocery shopping, etc. Anyways, the point of this tip is to study people who are out there doing it. So for example, to leave you with some tangible avenues to go on after this, people like Navy SEALs, okay? Super high level operators. People like coaches, like top level college football coaches, things like that. These are people who I study, read books on, listen to podcasts from. I know you might just be hearing this being like, you're a big weirdo. And I just definitely confirmed it with my last tangent. But yeah, well, yes, that's true. But yes, and if I'm just comparing myself to the like latest reel I saw on Instagram, or again, the negative Nancy down the street who's like, life's so hard, blah, blah, blah. I have 2 kids and this is so hard, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm going to be in that level. Why not? Like, it sounds silly to some people. Like, I'm a stay-at-home mom. Like, why am I going to and I know not all of us listening are stay-at-home moms, but say like, I'm just a mom, or I'm just whatever. I just work an office job and I'm a mom. Why am I going to listen to Navy SEAL stories or read books about habits from Navy SEALs or whatever? Because like there's still an excellent way to go about your vocation, your career, your whatever. So why not study these people who are at such high level in their fields? There are that, and there's an author too. I do not adhere to, promote, believe in like half the things he talks about. Tim Grover is his name. He wrote Winning, and I forget the other book, but his is like a little too much for me, where it's like very cutthroat, like at all costs, you must achieve your dreams. Like you must skip your kids' basketball game to achieve, like that kind of stuff that I'm not on board with. Okay. But he was I don't know, he still probably is a big, like high level performance coach for athletes. And it's just interesting hearing like Nick Saban, these kind of people where they just hold themselves to a certain standard, hold their players to a certain standard. I'm going to talk about this another time too. The idea of the rowing team, it's called Will it make the boat go faster? Like that was a very simple question. The coach asked the team about everything. Like, will it make the boat go faster? So it drove all their other decisions. I think this is so important. I think I'm going to wrap it up here because I could talk about this all day. Probably already have. I'm not looking at the time as I record this, but think about this. If nothing else, I want you to take away from this the idea that why shouldn't you study high level leaders, especially if you are a mom? You're leading all the time. Like leadership books, resources, inspiration should be your jam. I know this sounds like it's deviating a little bit from health, but you lead in all areas, whether you think you do or not. So if you're sitting on the couch telling your kids to go play outside or to get up and exercise or whatever, you are leading with a really crappy example. Okay. If you are like showing them how to do things, leading by actually doing it, that is so much more impactful. So I just think so many moms would think like, well, why would I read books by high performance coaches? Why would I read Navy SEAL books? Why would I listen to whatever kind of podcast, leadership podcast, personal development podcast? Because you have a very, very important job. Do not downplay your job. Rise up to the occasion of the job you have been given. And let's raise the bar for ourselves. All right. For 2024, let's do it. All right. We had to end it somewhere. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if it was. Email me, Brittany@healthycatholicmoms.com. Don't email me to tell me I'm a weirdo because I already know that. So that's fine. I would love to work with you. There's my other plug for myself. Like I said, go check out the programs, healthycatholicmoms.com. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Share this with somebody if it was inspiring for you. Please. I would appreciate it. All right. Talk to you ladies next time. We're going to talk about beautiful and productive morning routines. Until then, have a great rest of your day.